Emerging in the 1920s, the Hitlerjugend, the youth movement of the Nazi Party, served Hitler fanatically. After Hitler became Chancellor, the organization absorbed all young Germans. From an early age, they were given military and ideological training. By the time Germany was at war, they were ready and willing to serve. In 1943, the Hitler Youth were enlisted in the Flak, the anti-aircraft defense. They pointed searchlights and cannons in the direction of the Allied bombers to protect the German cities. There was no school, so the kids were delighted.
It's hard to describe how enthusiastic I was. An officer from the Luftwaffe came to our classroom and announced that those who were born in 26 and 27 would leave to join the Luftwaffe between the 10th and 15th of February 1943 as anti-aircraft assistants. We all sprang from our chairs and cried with joy. The noise was ear-splitting. Suddenly, we had become soldiers, exactly as we'd hoped. It was sheer joy.
Nacht- und Nachtjäger sind bereit. Nun mag der Tommy kommen. Bis vor werfen die englischen Luftpiraten ihre Bomben auf offene Dörfer und Städte. Es geht ihnen nicht nur um wirtschaftliche Ziele. Durch fortlaufende Beunruhigung hoffen sie, die deutsche Volkskraft zu schädigen.
We were convinced that Germany was conducting a defensive war. So we fulfilled our service with extreme zeal, and we tried our very hardest.
Handling real weapons, living dangerously, the excitement was at fever pitch for many, who were finally fighting as soldiers, as men, for the Führer and for the Reich. Among the 200,000 Flakhelfer was the writer Günter Grass and Joseph Ratzinger, the future Pope Benedict XVI.
One time, one afternoon, we shot down 2 fighter bombers in the space of half an hour. There was a sense of triumph.
I'd received the insignia for fighters of the anti-aircraft unit, something you only get when you have participated in destroying 8 airplanes mid-flight. So if my maths is correct, I participated in the deaths of around 50 people.
When they crashed to the ground before our eyes, after we shot them down, we were obviously dancing with joy. But once we got closer and saw the pilot all shriveled up like a rag doll in the fire, well, that really upset us terribly.
Between 2 waves of airstrikes, these young soldiers went back to being almost normal children. But the aerial superiority of the Allies left them little hope of victory or survival. Exhausted by lack of sleep, deafened because their ears were left unprotected, in actual fact, they were cannon fodder.
There was an air raid siren. We all left our buildings and went into the little woods nearby. And I was there with my friend, Heinz Gruber, at the edge of this wood. And probably about 650 feet from us, there was a train with carriages attached. And there, a few fighter bombers arrived and shot holes all over that train and its carriages full of goods, which were completely blasted to shreds. My friend said to me, "That was a close one again, but I got a stone in my back." He looked at me, and then I saw, how can I describe it, when the gaze shies away, and I thought to myself, what on earth is happening? And then he turned slightly, and I saw his back. There was nothing left but a gaping hole. He'd been hit by a 3/4-inch bullet to the back. Nothing could save him.
Some of our friends didn't return from the war, and that, for many of us, was the first lesson that made us start to think about the true meaning of it all. But it was also because of things like that that the adventurous aspect of the war was starting to be over, of course. From then on, it was hard all of the time, and ugly and pathetic.
The Allies bombarded Germany heavily. Beneath the pelting shells, the young people were experiencing a waking nightmare. They participated in civil defense operations to help the victims of air raids.
So we had to gather up the corpses, or actually bits of corpses, and load them onto trucks. It was a massacre beyond compare.
In a
building that had caught fire and had already partially collapsed, there was a woman whose arm, her forearm, was trapped under a steel beam. Firstly, we tried to lift the steel beam. It was impossible. The man in charge, or who gave the orders, a non-com, said, "Go fetch a saw, a handsaw." And then he placed a tourniquet on the top of this woman's arm, and I had to hold on to this tourniquet. Then he sawed off the arm. We were able to get her out, and just after that, the building completely collapsed. She would have died, so that way she survived. But that sound of a saw sawing into a human arm, that is unforgettable.
Most of these images were not broadcast. It was important not to lower the morale of the population. Defeat didn't stop the propaganda. On the contrary, it made it worse.
Kriegsfreiwillige der Hitlerjugend. Nach der vormilitärischen Ausbildung in den Wehrertüchtigungslagern hat sich ein Teil des ältesten HJ-Jahrganges aus eigenem und freiem Entschluss zum Einsatz in der Waffen-SS gemeldet. Aufmarsch zum Appell!
The regime's propaganda got it just right. In the autumn of 1943, 16,000 Hitler Youth of the class of 1926 joined the ranks of a new armored division of the Waffen-SS. Created by the leader of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, the 12th SS Panzer Division was baptized Hitlerjugend. They were 16 and 17 years old, teenagers. They still didn't have the right to smoke and drink, but they had the right to kill. The regime was counting on their audacity and lack of awareness in the face of danger. Joseph Goebbels proclaimed, "The enemy must know that even for our children, there is no other choice than to fight until the last." Leaving Belgium, where it had been training, the 12th SS Panzer Hitler Youth Division headed for Normandy. In May 1944, the region was not considered strategic by the Wehrmacht leadership. The Allied invasion was expected in Pas-de-Calais instead. On the 6th of June 1944, Operation Overlord was launched. The Allies landed in Normandy. This attack does not necessarily cause the Hitler Youth to panic.
When the information concerning the landing arrived, we had a big party in our unit because we thought, finally, they will stop attacking us only from the sky. They're also attacking on land, and so we'll be able to beat them. We were convinced that we were going to beat them.
The day after D-Day, the Hitler-Jugend division was sent to the city of Caen, a major Allied objective. The city was meant to fall within 24 hours. For these teenagers, it was a baptism by fire. Their aggressiveness was to transform those 24 hours into 6 weeks of hell for the Allied troops. The division stopped the British and Canadian offensive in front of the city gates. The Hitler Youth took many prisoners. German cameras filmed the last moments of the men doomed to die. As the young soldiers, under the command of Kurt Meyer, executed their prisoners of war by the dozen. At Ardennes Abbey, west of Caen, 18 Allied soldiers were assassinated. In the courtyard of the Château d'Audrieux, 45 Canadian soldiers were executed. In total, the SS Division Hitler Jugend killed over 150 prisoners of war. The children of the Third Reich had become war criminals.
The young people were such fanatics. They were more fanatical than their elders. They were ready to die for Hitler. They would have run and jumped out of the window. You had to watch out for them, more so than with the adults. They were caught up in madness. They were entirely submissive to Hitler. They were submissive. It was as simple as that. And they would have done anything at all.
War crimes, massacres, acts of violence. The years of indoctrination had paid off. The Allies quickly identified the 12th SS Hitler Jugend, which they nicknamed the Baby Division. Their recklessness and barbarism made them a formidable foe. The young people within its ranks were merciless machines of war. They did not hesitate to sacrifice their lives. Despite the barbarism that they demonstrated, the regime honored them. The showcase of the Reich remained as rose-tinted as ever, but the reality was very different. The landings had succeeded. The Wehrmacht had lost the Battle of Normandy. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were captured. Among them, thousands of young people. Once they'd saluted with outstretched arm, but now they surrendered with both hands. These defeats did not prevent the Hitler Youth from going on to fight on other fronts.
I can still recall very clearly a discussion with my friend, Hans Keller. We were saying, so apparently it's not only collapsing in the east, but also in the west, right? Yes. But from there to losing the war, that was out of the question. It was impossible.
Convinced that they were the last resort of the Reich, young volunteers flooded into the combat units, willingly or otherwise.
So wie sich in der Kampfzeit die Hitlerjugend aus freiem Entschluss zu Führer und Reich bekannte, ist sie heute zur Bewegung der Kriegsfreiwilligen geworden. An historischer Stätte wurde in einer Kundgebung dem Führer die Meldung der Kriegsfreiwilligen des Jahrganges 1928 erstattet. Das Gebiet Ostpreußen hier meldet 9.482 Kriegsfreiwillige der Hitlerjugend.
Das wurde befohlen.
It was an order, like in the army. You couldn't say, I'm not going. My father would have been put in a camp, or my mother would have been punished. That's how it was at the time. We were forced to volunteer, and those who didn't volunteer had their heads shaved.
Heute melde ich Ihnen, mein Führer, dass sich von den Hitlerjungen des Jahrganges 1928 70% kriegsfreiwillig zu den Fahnen gemeldet haben. Die echte Kriegsfreiwilligkeit dieser Jugend wird in der Kampfmoral auf dem Schlachtfeld lebendig sein.
The arrival at the front of these young recruits did not boost the morale of the soldiers. They were very skeptical about their aptitude for fighting.
They said we were mad.
At first, they laughed when we arrived. It must be said that most of them had been at war for so long already, they were all wounded in some way or another.
And they really lectured us and asked us what we thought we could achieve. They said to us, can't you see that everything is going down the drain? And anyway, why did you volunteer to come here?
The myth of a heroic and victorious war gave way to reality. The young soldiers were unable to block the Allies' progress.
I went there with 4 friends. They were real friends, not just soldiers. And of those friends, in the space of 2 or 3 weeks, 3 of them fell. So it was quite tough. At that point, of course, we felt like we were cannon fodder.
We'd been taught to fight for the country until death, and we took that very seriously. And that's what we wanted to do. We were steeped in madness, as though drugged, blinded.
Whether at the Battle of the Bulge or on the Eastern Front, the Hitler Youth marched into battle. They had no choice. Surrender was forbidden. Firing squads shot down deserters.
Der Führer empfängt in seinem Hauptquartier den Reichsjugendführer Axmann mit einer Abordnung von 20 Hitlerjungen, die sich bei der Verteidigung ihrer Heimat besonders bewährt haben und dafür mit dem Eisernen Kreuz ausgezeichnet wurden.
On March the 20th, 1945, Adolf Hitler made his final appearance on the news and congratulated the Hitler Youth that he'd sent to the slaughter. He told them, "Your fight is now a vital experience. To be or not to be, such is the choice of the German people. I'm sure that beyond our difficult ordeals, victory shall be ours, since it is to our young, to you, that it is owed above all." Among these last fighters were very young children, like Alfred Czech, 12 years old, or Wilhelm Hübner, just turned 16, but who looks much younger, interviewed for the occasion.
Als der Russe näher an Lauern heranrückte, habe ich mich dem Kampfkommandanten von Lauban freiwillig als Melder zur Verfügung gestellt. Meine Aufgabe bestand darin, Meldungen zu den einzelnen Kompaniegefechtsständen zu bringen. Außerdem habe ich oftmals Panzerfäuste und Verfehlungen in die Aufgabenbedingungen gebracht.
Hitler was no longer capable of controlling his gestures and suffered from what looks like Parkinson's disease. At 56, he looked like an old man and expressed no remorse.
Hitler and his entourage had completely lost all sense of reality. He couldn't care less what would happen to the German people. Hitler even said, if the German people die out, they alone are responsible. It was really a gang of criminals. There's no other way to put it.
German cities deserve to be destroyed. They're too cowardly. The people have forsaken me. That was what he was saying, that idiot.
Even in April of 45, a month before the capitulation, the machine was still in operation. Young child soldiers were still being sent into battle. In the streets, posters called on the population to defend their cities. Even children as young as 10 were being called up.
We had been examined on the 4th of April, 1945. Some of my class were deemed apt. We had received camouflage fatigues from the Waffen-SS. The sleeves and the legs of the pants had to be taken up for me. I measured 5'2", so apparently there were no camouflage uniforms for short people.
On April the 16th, the heaviest artillery barrage of the war began. $1,236,000 shells were fired by the Soviet armies. 100,000 tons of steel rained down on the Germans. On the 25th of April, the Red Army entered Berlin. Wherever they fight, some of the Hitler Youth suddenly realize that they might die.
It was a question of survival. We shot in the direction we thought the enemy would be coming from. We were shooting based on the motto, look out ahead, like when we threw stones as kids. Except that for us, they were grenades. So I threw grenades and tried to make it out alive. We were surrounded 7 times, and we made it through 7 times. 9 of my classmates lost their lives.
People were dropping like flies. For us, it was clear that now we just wanted to save our hides.
We'd borne the full brunt of the attacks. My friend was dead and I was lying there. And my shoes had been torn from my feet. And then I went into the trench before the next wave arrived, before the next bombs fell. Then the trench was hit and I was buried.
Next to me, there was another one of my friends, a soldier. He had been wounded. I wanted to get out of my hole to help him. Alphonse helped me, he was saying. But the leader, he was a bit further on behind him, yelled out, I order you to stay in the hole. So that, so to speak, saved my life, because when the bombs are falling, you mustn't leave your hole. And I only learned later that my friend was dead. You can't even imagine it. It was the worst thing I've ever experienced in my whole life. That was when I started to wonder, who needs war? That's when I truly understood what war really was at the age of 17.
mit 17 Jahren.
Many of these child soldiers snapped. Some of them hadn't wanted the war to pass them by, but now they wanted to bypass the war. Equipped with light weapons, the Hitler Youth harried the tanks of 18 Soviet armies. The soldiers of the Red Army had to flush them out like rats. While the young people were being decimated, Adolf Hitler was sheltered in his bunker 23 feet below the ground. On the surface, every square foot was an ambush, shootout, or hand-to-hand combat.
But all of a sudden, I found myself facing Russians, and they shot at me with a submachine gun. But I survived because I managed to hide behind a pile of rubble. So I was still able to crawl to take a few steps forward. We'd been trained to be tough, in spite of a punctured lung. I was still able to breathe a little. My left arm was dangling down, but the right was still intact. And then there was a Royal Tiger operating. Those were the biggest German tanks. At the back, there was a tow bar system. So, in my despair, I gripped onto this with my right hand and was dragged along by the tank. It took me a couple of miles until it stopped at some kind of residential development in the forest.
The Soviets were everywhere in the city. They pointed their cannons towards the Pischeldorf Bridge, guarded by 600 Hitler Youth. It was a massacre. Most did not survive it. On the 30th of April, the Soviets launched the attack on the Reichstag. The dictator who had chosen to stay in Berlin committed suicide with a bullet to the head. The Hitler Youth, who once considered themselves the Führer's children, were suddenly orphaned.
I'll say it more or less as I thought of it at the time. A hero is dead. Nothing more. A hero in inverted commas.
That was one of the most curious phenomena in the history of Germany in those years. At midday, we would still have obeyed any order from the Führer. But by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it was all over. So how could that be possible? I have no idea. It was like an awakening, like waking up with a hangover.
When Hitler died, I was very sad. In a little notebook I wrote on the 1st of May, 1945, "The Führer is dead. What will happen now?"
Solomon Perel was a young German Jew. He hid his identity to escape extermination. Taken for a boy of German extraction, he had been integrated for 3 years among the young members of the party.
You might think that this little Jewish Solomon would be delighted. No. My reaction was mitigated, actually. I took the news like this. The Führer is dead. Everything is ruined. But at the same time, I told myself, yes, well, now maybe you'll be out of danger again.
In May '45, unconditional surrender was signed by the last high dignitaries of the Third Reich in the suburbs of Berlin. The Hitler Youth, lured by the prospect of power and glory, will have reaped nothing but the horror of war and defeat.
I went back to see the captain. I informed him and I said, "But Captain, that's impossible. Germany can't possibly surrender." With that, the captain put his arm on my shoulder and said, "You know, lad, truth sometimes requires more courage than lies." So then I understood that it was over. I cried like a baby.
Many of the soldiers, particularly the older ones, said, "What luck that this mayhem is over and done with."
Europe was bled dry by the war. While the Allies shared Germany, millions of displaced refugees sought to return to their own countries. Among them, Hans Müncheberg, wounded, needed care and lied on his records. He hid the fact that he was a soldier and was taken in by villagers.
I arrived one evening in this village, and there a man with white hair who accosted me and told me, "My friend, there's a curfew. You shouldn't be out and about in the street." Then he said to me, "Well then, come and stay with us." And when I went back with him, I was terrified because no one spoke German. They were Polish. And then he took me to a bedroom. In that bedroom, there were only 2 metal-framed beds. In those 2 beds, there were men with shaved heads wearing striped clothing. And then the 2 former prisoners of concentration camps slept in the same bed so that I could lie down in the other one. Can you imagine it? Because I had lied, I found myself a bed, and there were 2 prisoners of concentration camps. Where was the truth? Where was the lie? So that night I understood that there had been so many lies.
For the Hitler Youth, the fall of the Reich did not necessarily constitute a liberation. Thousands of them were detained by the Allies in huge prisoner-of-war camps. The Allies were aware that they were harboring a generation of Germans born, educated, and fanaticized under Hitler. Some were still Nazis. The victors had to think ahead. It was now their turn to win over this lost and partially sacrificed youth. Thus began a long period of re-education for this new generation, both in the classroom and in the prison camps.
German prisoners attend special classes to fit them for leadership in their own country. The Gestapo, they learn, is out, along with other fascist institutions in the reconstruction of Germany.
The children of Hitler discovered a new world and a new word: democracy. To denazify them, the victors held screenings. The cinema, once used to indoctrinate, was used by the Allies to confront the German people with Nazi crimes.
We had to watch films about Auschwitz. Horrors upon horrors.
I couldn't get over it because there were these mountains of corpses lying there. It was terrifying. I no longer understood the world.
That concentration camps existed, we'd known that for a very long time. But as for what was really happening there had never been any really trustworthy information about that.
At first, I didn't believe it. I thought it was propaganda that they were screening to show how disgraceful we were.
Vorzuführen, wie schlechte Menschen wir sind.
To convince the most reticent, the Allies also resorted to visits to the death camps.
We were shocked that Germans had done this. And then we heard the first testimonies. How could a people who had Goethe and Schiller and so many others do this kind of thing? At that point, we felt ashamed.
What horror that Germans had done such a thing. It will weigh on our history forever.
From that moment on, I was ashamed. So ashamed that I never dared speak of it. And I never told anyone that I had been in the SS. I was ashamed. Even now, I'm still ashamed.
As Germany put itself back together, the Hitler Youth who had been prisoners of war returned home, sometimes after long years of imprisonment. Alphonse Richner was freed after 3.5 years of detainment in the Soviet Union.
The Russian was always saying, "Skoro domoy," meaning home soon, home soon. And we would say, yeah, as if. Then one day, you're going home. So that was it. I can't describe it. At the train station, there was even an orchestra to bid us farewell. And because I was very young, just a boy, a Russian woman held me by the sleeve. And when we were saying goodbye, she said to me, half in Russian, half in German, "Son, come back, but without weapons."
After several years spent in Belgian mines, Wilhelm Küpper found his family.
They were surprised. My mother, she couldn't speak. She couldn't stop holding my hand. She said nothing. She just touched me. It was very moving, but she was surprised because, naturally, my return was unannounced. She hadn't seen me for 4 years. And all of a sudden, there I was in front of her. My father was in hospital. He said, "Willi, the most important thing is that our family made it out of the war unscathed."
Solomon Perel is one of the sole survivors of his family. The young Jew, educated as a Nazi for 4 years, nearly forgot his very identity.
After the war, I returned to Brunswick. I saw someone coming towards me with the striped uniform worn by prisoners. And all of a sudden, I saw the yellow Jewish star on his chest, on which was written, Jew. I asked him, "Excuse me, are you Jewish?" He completely ignored me, because to him, I was surely not Jewish. He was probably thinking that I expected something from him. He left me standing there and kept walking. I was really hurt. And then I went back to him, faced him. And in that moment, again quite miraculously, I remembered 2 words with which the most sacred Jewish prayers begin. Shema Israel. And then I got the feeling that he believed me. And I hugged him, almost suffocating. And that's when I said my real name for the first time. And that's when I started the process of becoming Sally the Jew again.
In the new Germany under construction, many understood that the regime had stolen their youth. But even after all these years, a question still haunts them.
How is it possible that we could have run around after such a bawler? Today, all that clamoring is simply repulsive.
When I was 10 years old, the Third Reich had existed for 8 years. We had known nothing other than the Third Reich. We didn't know anything else. That's how it was.
In their twilight years, some of the Hitler Youth feel that they have a mission. Their survival must have meaning. They want to tell their story.
One day I was in school, and it was a day or two before the school holidays. Of course, the students were not very interested, understandably. They all wanted to go away on holiday and not listen to this kind of thing. And so I said to them, "You," to an immigrant girl, I said to her, "You, I would have killed you. Aren't you interested to find out why I would have done that?" And then she looked at me with wide eyes. So we talked about the subject. It's my duty. It is the only thing that I can still do to contribute to it not happening ever again. I also go to classes with a Jewish woman who had remained here and who had been hidden, and we both speak together. And, well, it's wonderful. It's my way of redeeming myself.
If we can make young people in Germany passionate about peace the way we were made passionate about war back then, well, then we will live in peace in Europe forever.
People are always complaining about democracy, and I say to them, look at this and this. Think of the Third Reich. A troubled democracy is still preferable to a totalitarian state.